If Snake Mountain's a rockin', then this guy's probably knockin'. Here's your look at the Mattel Master Universe Masterverse, Master Universe New Eternia, Ram Man. A one-man wrecking crew, the hard-headed warrior known as Ram Man, can break down any door, crumble any tower, and even turn a mountain into rubble, for a price, of course. He is untrusting of anyone, but has a reputation of being a man of his word. The battle charger and last of the stone skulls searches New Eternia for clues to his long-lost lineage. Who really needs keys for doors anymore? Before, of course, we get a closer look at the new Ram Man, let's go ahead and grab the tape measure and see how tall the figure stands. Ram Man's actually about 6.5 inches in height, or the figure's going to be about 17 centimeters tall. As you probably have already noticed, I'm still battling a bit of a sore throat, so bear with me. Let's bring in some of the other figures we've looked at lately here in this channel for comparison's sake. Here's what figure looks like with the Revelation Clamp. And just because, again, like it's from the Revelation does not mean that you can't have the figures displayed together. Until, of course, we get ourselves a new Eternia version of Clamp Champ, which that may not even very well happen. I'm more than happy to have the figures displayed together. Here's as well what the figure looks like with the Master Universe Revelation Prince Adam. Here's what the figure looks like with the more recently looked at Pighead. And of course, if we are going to be looking at the new Eternia figures, as bad as he may be, here's what the figure as well looks like with He-Man. One other thing, obviously, as well, if you guys are going to be looking at this figure, you probably will want to also know what he looks like compared along with his Origins self. And here's what the figure looks like with the Master Universe Origins Ram Man. Now, I'll say right away, I think there's some choices that Mattel made for the release of Ram Man that don't really make the most sense to me. Most of all being some of the accessories, first of all, the figure comes included with. I'm okay with the fact that, first of all, Ram Man comes included with his axe. The original vintage toy and the Origins follow-up both had axes. The axe is nicely sculpted. You can see there's some indentations added to the actual molded plastic, and I like the darker color of the gunmetal silver that they went with. The figure also comes included with some gripping hands, because as of right now, the figure has only closed fist in his forearms, and that's going to be helping anybody. Rather, instead, if you want to have the gripping hands, easily just take either one of his hands and remove it carefully from the forearm. Replace it then with the gripping hand. And just look at that. Just like that, we can actually take his axe, slide it into his hand, and Ram Man now has a weapon he can wield. Ram Man can also wield 2 other alternate head sculpts, as the figure comes with a total of 3. I really honestly don't think they needed really 3 head sculpts, but Mattel felt the need to include 3. I feel like it's just wasted plastic by this point to throw in all these extra things. This particular head sculpt is very close in resembling the one that we did get from the Master Universe Origins line of Ram Man. This one, of course, had the longer guard in the front, but it's very similarly designed. Well, I guess more so here in the front faceplate, not as much from the top of the head sculpt. And he also comes included with this head sculpt, which takes the whole idea of Ram Man and turns him up on his side, gives him some additional spikes there on the top of his head, gives him apparently goggles. I didn't think Ram Man really needed goggles, and gave him a more decked out, darker color scheme, kind of more of this bluish silver color, and some additional red outlining down below here. It's an okay head sculpt, but for me, I just want an OG looking Ram Man, and I feel like neither one of these head sculpts would accommodate my desired interest. Now, of course, that's only solely me. My ramblings behind the camera may not match the same ramblings as other Master Universe collectors. But I honestly just feel, though, like these 2 head sculpts weren't necessarily needed to be packed along with Ram Man. If, though, you wanted to go full tilt when it came to changing out the character's design, to go along with this head sculpt, he comes included with a new brand new armor bandolier. The bandolier does have, there you can see some detailing on the front. It looks almost like a dragon's head. Again, still using sort of more that, again, I don't know what color you would describe this as, kind of like a bluish silver, for example. There is a section, at least on the back at least, that you could take, for example, Ram Man's battle axe here. And on the back of this, you can just clip this battle axe in place. Just take the handles there. You can probably either have it up or have it down. I just prefer to have it down myself. Unfortunately, there is no other place to store this on the default version of Ram Man, so I wish there was like clips here. But in order to have clips here, that means you wouldn't be able to put this on properly. Putting this on, by the way, just involves you removing the straps on the side. Do the same thing on the other side. Sometimes these do get a little hung up on themselves. There we go. And then it's just a case of draping this around Ram Man's torso. You don't even have to remove any shoulder piece. It's more than enough to accommodate the space. And then you just strap these in. I'm not going to do it all the way in, but I guess I can do some of it in. There we go. We'll just slide these in. It does, I mean, again, it allots for enough space. It's just a little kind of harder because there's so much bulk to deal with. It also helps if I put it the right way. There we go. Strap that in on the one side. And seeing as we have committed to it and all, let's do it on the other side as well. Strap that in. It's not a look that's going to stay very long on Ram Man, believe you me. And then from there, of course, you can take the head sculpt, pop it off, there we go, and replace it with this one. Now, again, I think it looks a lot less like Ram Man and just an amalgamation of different designs all sort of mushed together. Not my ideal when it comes to Ram Man. I suppose, if anything, Mattel was thinking outside the box. But again, when the box was already fine when it was in the first place with the design of Ram Man, I didn't feel there was a need to really start to redesign things. By the way, in case you guys want to see what it looks like also with this head sculpt, again, it's okay for Ram Man, but it looks honestly more like just a generic knight. Like if you had several of these, for example, you could have just a defaulted OG Ram Man in the front, and then in the background you could have several ones of these just kind of all displayed with this particular head sculpt. No, for me at least, I'm going to be going back to the OG look. And again, that's just my own personal preference more than anything else. Head sculpt wise, for at least this head sculpt, looks really good. It takes the elements, of course, from the original Ram Man design, which I don't have the original one, but I do have the follow-up Origins release of Ram Man. Of course, a little more squished in the face was this release. You get more of a chance at least to see the sculpting work that Mattel put into the head sculpt here for Ram Man. It's a really nice looking head sculpt, honestly. The darker color of the gunmetal silver that they've used here, not to mention, again, if he's breaking down doorways, literally and figuratively, you would imagine there'd be some damage all across his helmet. And he's nicely got all of that all the way around. I have one big problem when it comes to this figure, and that has nothing at all to do with all this extra stuff that they threw our way. It's more so the design of not the torso necessarily, not the arms, but the lower legs. The lower legs, as you may have already noticed, is encased in rubber. They've done it in such a way, I suppose, it's supposed to give him a seamless look, that it's supposed to look like his lower legs are all springs. The problem with that is that when you start to bend the legs, you can feel like, first of all, there's resistance, pushing against whatever bend you want to try to put the figure in. But I also feel like this will eventually start to split. If we were to, say, draw our attention to this Ram Man, the original Ram Man would have just been a case where you snapped it down in place and you sprung back up. You would have not had knee articulation. But they were clever at least by including the knee articulation as a hidden point on the figure. So when you had the leg straight, for example, you'd never be any wiser to know that there is actually knee articulation until you go in and start to bend this. Why wouldn't they have taken the blueprint for that and carried it over for Ram Man here from New Eternia, instead of actually just having a hidden away joint that is only noticeable until you start to bend it? Instead, they decide to foolishly, I feel, encase the whole thing in rubber, because I feel like over time this is going to start to split. And especially, though, if you're going to have the figure bend, even though you're not probably going to have the figure posed in any crazy ways, he does have at least the benefit of the pegals and the bottoms of his feet. So if you wanted to, you could use yourself a display stand if you want to have, for example, him in a running pose. But I just don't think it was smart ideas on their part to include a rubber body for at least the lower half of his legs. Just, again, take a page from this original Ram Man from the Origins line. He was a fine way to, first of all, hide the joint, but still find a way to include it. It was just a case of bending the knee. They could have easily done something similar here with this Ram Man, instead of wasting the time, wasting materials, and wasting the potential of this figure breaking down the road by just encasing in rubber. For the articulation for Ram Man, his head's going to be on ball joint, so it rotates all the way around. It looks down, and it looks up, and it rocks, of course, back and forth. That same head articulation limits a little bit when you get to this head sculpt, because, of course, he's got a larger face plate on the front, and his helmet actually drapes down a little bit further as well, so you're not going to get as much of the bends. Like, if, for example, seeing as I was talking about it and all, if you were to, say, replace this head sculpt, popping it all the way on there, there we go. Bending the head down, it only goes, well, I guess it goes about the same, so maybe scratch that. It's going to be a little bit, again, I feel it's a little bit more uglier of a head portrait myself, but I guess looking at it, there's enough clearance on the inside of it. You can still bend the head at the same level, same angle, I should say, as this version of Rayman. I'm just going to stick with this head sculpt myself. Now, the upper torso is going to be on a ball joint. You can rotate it all the way around, really, if you wanted to, up and down and back and forth as well. Arms come out comfortably at 90 degrees. You can take those arms and move them forward, move them back. He has a swivel at the bicep. Still manages to get a double bend on the elbow, but, I mean, look at the size of the bicep. It's next to impossible to get this guy in a double bend in the elbow. And the hands rotate all the way around and hinging back and forth. Now, again, when it gets to the lower leg, the lower waist section, he has a waist swivel here. The legs do split out for all intents and purposes. You can see, like, right here, it's just regular plastic. Why wouldn't they just have used the same plastic and carried that all the way down to the bottoms of his boots, or his top halves of his boots? And he also has it here. So it's only really this section to this section that is encased in rubber. I think they could have just gone a simpler route myself. The figure still manages to have a bend in the knee. You can still somewhat rotate the lower boots. You ankle pivot back and forth, excuse me. You can also rock it back and forth this way as well. You know, again, like, it's a good looking Ram Man. I mean, it looks like the original vintage Ram Man. And funny enough, Ram Man was one of the first, if not my first figure that I collected from the original vintage Master Universe line. And close enough in quarters, close enough in design at least, we have Master Universe Origins Ram Man. And Ram Man here is a nice looking figure. I wasn't so crazy about the head sculpt that they decided to settle on when it came to this version of Ram Man. Again, they've modernized it nicely, but there are a few things they didn't necessarily need to modernize. Sculpt and paint are definitely too, but I don't feel like there needed to be. I don't think anybody was really screaming, let's have seamless joints for the lower half of his body. I guess the idea is it's supposed to look more like a spring for his springing legs. But the end result is it's just going to cause problems down the road that rubber material that they ended up choosing is not going to start to split on poor Ram Man here. Ram Man I always considered to be a more simple soldier that just had a really cool gimmick. You sprung down his legs and he projected himself forward, basically ramming into anything that was in his way. By adding all this extra armor that Mattel did, it might be fine for some, but I just prefer the OG look of Ram Man more so myself. He basically is just a larger, more modernized, better articulated version of the original vintage and the follow-up Master Universe Origins Ram Man, and I'm okay with that. I mean, other people, of course, may be open to the idea of displaying their figures with a more modern take, but for me, just give me the OG look, and for me, all those extra things that came included with Ram Man, other than just really his axe, are going to be going back into a baggie, never really going to be seeing a light of day. The one thing I think that Mattel missed their mark on was rubberizing the lower legs. Nowhere at all did I feel like any of us were asking for seamless-looking lower legs for Ram Man. If you wanted to have a seamless look, the Master Universe Origins was doing a fine job for Ram Man. He still had lower leg articulation that bent at the knee, and it still was hidden enough when you had the legs straight. The fact that they'd actually have plastic on the tops of his thighs, and then have plastic at the bottom sculpted in the same way, connecting the two with a rubberized tube made absolutely no sense to me. They could have easily just had those sculpts merged together and just have a split in the knee similar to what we got with the Master Universe Origins. That just means that it's going to limit the lifespan of this guy, depending on the conditions of where you have your figure stored, may also dictate how quickly rubberized material will start to degrade. Now, some of my rubber figures I already have in my collection. One that comes to my mind is DC Superheroes Clayface, one of my all-time favorite figures. It has already started to flake. It hasn't flaked as bad as some people have actually shown images of theirs flaking. It probably will again, depending on how much humidity you have in your collection room, will determine, really, how long of a life you get from Ram Man's lower legs. And that should have never been the case at all. What do you guys think of the Master Universe New Eternia Ram Man? And do you also agree the figure never really needed to have rubberized lower legs? Or do you like the decision that Mattel ended up going with? Also, as well, if you guys enjoyed the video, want to hit with a like. If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing and you certainly would like to stick around for more, I promise that by the time we're going to be looking at stuff like this again, I'll probably hopefully have a better throat. Not as sore as it has been over the last couple of reviews. But there's definitely going to be a lot more videos coming your way, guys. The key to making sure you're not missing out on any of that is, once again, hitting the subscribe button down below and turning on the bell notification. Of course, as always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.